Oh, hello again. Welcome back. Alas, it is time we continue the grand tale of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. A tale I've been waiting to tell for a special occasion, which would end up being when we hit 15,000 subscribers. We ended the first chapter of this grand tale with the firm establishment of our Grand Union. You may expect me to just get right into the next part, but first, I'd like to do a recap of the last video's events. The Russian Empire at the time was trying to industrialize as best as it could. However, a lot of the capital was owned by foreign businesses that took every opportunity they could to exploit the working class of Russia. While all this was going on, tensions in Europe had been on the rise. Alliances were forming and Europe was ready to blow. It all came to a head in July 1914 when Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo by a man believed to be working for the Serbian government. The Great War began and it was devastating for all sides involved. Russia got the bad end of the stick. Plagued by instability before the war, our issues were only amplified. The people hated the war, and things were only getting worse as the Central Powers pushed further and further east. We had hope when Tsar Nicholas II abdicated and a provisional government was formed. However, the provisional government wanted to continue the war, which pissed off basically everyone. It resulted in Lev Kornilov attempting a march on Petrograd, which failed because the working class rallied together to stop a proto-fascist takeover. We overthrew the capitalist government not long after, establishing the Soviet government. It wasn't as smooth as that though. The Germans seized the opportunity to imprison the people of Eastern Europe, and the white reactionaries seized control of Siberia, commencing the Russian Civil War. The spirit of the working class came together to fight Kolchak's Russian state and retake the land lost to the Germans. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was born on April 6, 1923. Now that you're all caught up, we could just jump straight to 1936. If you want to do that, you can just click ahead to the timestamp on screen. However, between 1923 and 1936, a lot happened. This just provides context. In 1924, our great leader Vladimir Lenin sadly passed away. Although he preferred Leon Trotsky, the majority of the party supported Joseph Stalin. He became the new leader that year, beginning a new age for Russia. Stalin wanted to accelerate industrialization, though not in the way that the Russian Empire did. He also would have massive paranoia, which became very apparent in 1936. In 1925, we struck a deal with the Empire of Japan. In exchange for Japan's withdrawal of all support for Grigory Semyonov's forces in the Far East, we'd give them North Sakhalin. This deal was accepted, and the Red Army marched on Chita soon after. The Far Eastern Republic was folded into the USSR soon after, technically making 1925 the official end of the Russian Civil War. At the same time, the Kuomintang was reorganizing itself in China. After the death of Sun Yat-sen in 1925, Chiang Kai-shek rose to power in his place, making China a military dictatorship that only spiritually followed Sun Yat-sen's three principles. They launched the Northern Expedition the year after, and managed to overcome a sweeping majority of the warlords that had formed in the wake of the Beiyang government's failure. The Northern Expedition was a success, and the Beiyang government collapsed, and the Fengtian clique was pushed back to Manchuria. This came at a cost though, as disagreements between the KMT and CPC spiraled into the Chinese Civil War. By 1936, the Civil War was at a standstill due to a looming threat of the Japanese Empire, which had since occupied Manchuria. The Japanese are clearly waiting for an excuse to invade China. Sadly, there's not much we can do. The most concerning thing that's happened these past few years was the rise of a new dangerous ideology in Europe. Fascism has become deeply rooted in Germany and Italy. Germany in particular is extremely racist and revanchist now, meaning they will likely stop at nothing but total continental domination. Of course, this is only conjecture, but we must be wary of them at all times. Now that we're all caught up, let us continue the great story of the USSR. Today, we will discuss the greatest war Russia has fought yet. Let us commence. "1936 arrives, and things in the world are getting tense once more. Stalin is still at the helm of the Union, but not all is well. He knows his rule is unpopular among certain cliques in the government, leading to him being massively paranoid. He decided we needed to begin the Great Purge to eliminate the remaining Trotskyites and right communists. This comes at a bad time, as we are also trying to industrialize the Union as quickly as we can. To consolidate his power, Stalin pushed through the Stalin Constitution, which, although it promised some rights, was ultimately just a ploy by the chairman to fully secure his rule. We have been slowly but surely reforming the military. We want to have a tank force by 1940 or sometime around that year. However, we need additional technology for it to be truly effective. For now, we have to rely on our very basic infantry divisions. For now, it's okay since we don't plan on directly expanding for a bit, though we do need to get a proper division soon since we really can't afford to repeat the humiliation of Brest-Litovsk. Experience is the best teacher, so by sending 5 divisions led by General Zhukov to assist the Spanish Republic, we can get plenty of army experience to reform the military. The infantry we send is just some 18 whiff infantry with support artillery, but against undersupplied enemies it should be fine. To eliminate the opposition, Stalin and the NKVD would open terrorist centers so the opposition could be framed for crimes they did not commit, like plotting to kill Stalin. The Zinoviev terror center was the first, targeting Grigory Zinoviev, a major figure in the opposition. We began the first Moscow trot to frame Zinoviev for a conspiracy that never actually existed. I wanted the purge to be wrapped up as fast as possible, so I tried focusing mainly on internal matters. The NKVD became the main perpetrator of the Great Purge and our primary intelligence agency. They would be responsible for all the purges. We even purged one of the main architects of the purges, General Yagoda, for being slow. I did the focus to unlock the Agitprop minigame. This lets us put up propaganda posters that give us buffs for a few months. Some of the buffs we got from these posters ended up being crucial in our most trying times. When choosing specifically what kind of military propaganda we wanted, I decided on positive heroism because I really wanted to get tanks since I believed they were the future of warfare, rather than the archaic cavalry and increasingly ineffective ground infantry. Positive heroism gives me more tank buffs, so getting them is essential. Back in Spain, we launched a counterattack in the north to try getting the momentum back in the Republic's favor. To my surprise, the attack went really well and we even captured Burgos. However, the Germans and Italians had sent a lot of support to the nationalists, so the war was not looking good for us at all. To make the most out of our involvement, we decided to steal the Spanish Republic's gold reserves. Not long after, we were forced to retreat from Burgos due to a nationalist counteroffensive. Stalin decided we couldn't risk having new traitors be born, so we banned anti-Soviet thought in the military academies. We had built up enough industry to declare the second 5-year plan officially complete, marking a great milestone in Stalin's mission to mass industrialize Russia. We can now invite foreign specialists to make industrialization even more efficient, but we made sure they couldn't control our industry. The factories are in the hands of the working class, not foreign businessmen. Stalin was still paranoid about internal plots, so it was time to begin working on handling another traitor to Russia, Leon Trotsky. Trotsky was the other candidate for a Lenin successor, and a guy a lot of people expected to take charge. He was exiled in 1929 by Stalin's order. He currently resides in Mexico, so he poses no threat, right? Well, being paranoid as always, Stalin suspected that there was a Trotskyite plot. In case there was, the anti-Soviet Trotsky Center was created as a farce to root out any sympathizers to Trotsky. Although he is in exile in Mexico, who says he can't orchestrate a coup while in exile? We cannot take risks, so we sent some operatives into Mexico in preparation for a future operation. By now, the conflict between China and Japan had erupted once more. We made sure to send equipment to our ideological friends in the Chinese Soviet Republic. We must stand together against these foreign tyrants who seek to destroy the workers' spirit. Sadly, we got the news that the nationalists had proclaimed victory in the Spanish Civil War. Luckily, Zhukov and his detachment were able to flee without issue. Still, this means Spain will not be in our sphere and is now favorable to the Axis powers. It's less of a problem for us though, and more of a problem for the Allies. The NKVD officially laid out the plans to assassinate Trotsky, and once we knew where Trotsky resided, our operatives in Mexico began preparations. Stalin decided that the Ural Mountains would be a good place to build more factories, as the mountains can't be used for much else. We're building our military industry in Siberia, by the way, so that our military-industrial complex is safe in the event of a foreign invasion. The expansion of the industry also called for new universities to be opened around the Union, so more workers could receive an education. This would also expand our R&D base, which was kind of small in comparison to the other major European powers. The second 5-year plan was very successful, and our factory count was growing really well. Our industrial capacity was growing to an extent that could rival the United States. We can keep that success going with a third 5-year plan. Over a third period of 5 years, the USSR could truly reach new heights that the old Russian Empire never could have expected. However, there is some doubt that this can be achieved because of what's been happening in Europe. The German Reich is expanding its grasp on the continent. In 1938, Germany officially annexed Austria. Now, they've gone and basically taken Czechoslovakia for free after practically being given the green light by the Allies. Hitler is known for his extreme racism towards people whom he blames for Germany's defeat in the Great War, which includes Slavs, the majority race of our union. There is genuine worry now because of Hitler, but to our surprise, the Germans had an offer for us. They offered a non-aggression pact and proposed dividing Eastern Europe between our two nations. I decided to accept because I knew for a fact we weren't ready just yet. By accepting this offer from the German Reich, we were buying ourselves some much needed time to expand the army a bit more. We needed to reform the army as best as we could. That is easier said than done for sure, but Stalin knows he needs stronger units. We had been focusing so much on building up the economy and purging enemies of the government that we hadn't put much focus on the military. We needed to strengthen the mobilization plan now before it was too late. We also finally wrapped up one loose end. One of our agents in Mexico, a Spanish man who we recruited during the Spanish Civil War, managed to assassinate Trotsky with an ice axe. This wrapped up one more loose end, leaving very few people capable of plotting against the regime. This came at the perfect time, as Germany invaded Poland shortly after, thus beginning World War II. Poland fell pretty quickly. They didn't have much land to recruit from due to their defeat in the Polish-Soviet War, so it's no surprise they got destroyed by the Wehrmacht. Thankfully, Germany honored the pact, so we got what we agreed on. We need to begin expanding ourselves now. If we just sit around, Germany is undoubtedly going to absorb our neighbors to strengthen itself and kill us. Mainly the Baltics, which we luckily have a claim to, being the successor of the Russian Empire. We enacted a war economy in preparation. We began spreading communist influence in the Baltic states to ensure that they wouldn't resist our ultimatums. We also began pressuring Romania to cede Bessarabia back to us, as it was a Russian territory before the Great War. We could send some ultimatums to Estonia and Latvia, who promptly submitted. Lithuania took some extra time because I was missing political power, but they gave in. Romania also surrendered Bessarabia. With some easy expansion out of the way, we finally deployed our first 4 tank divisions. These were placed under the command of newly promoted Field Marshal Georgy Zhukov. I decided that Finland would be a good place to test my tanks, so I lined up my tanks on the border, along with some infantry, in preparation to secure the area around Leningrad. I did the focus to get the war goal, and I was ready to declare war. However, something stopped me right in my tracks. For some reason, Germany had guaranteed Finland. What an asshole. So now we're back to just building up the army. I decided to shift my attention to the Air Force since I had neglected it up until that point. I wasn't sure if I had the time to get a sizable Air Force ready, but better late than never. However, something happened that would change our nation's history forever. We realized that because the war in the West had reached a standstill, Germany had begun moving to begin their other war plans. The vast majority of the Axis ground forces were now on our border. Our worst fears were coming true. The Nazis are preparing to invade our great union. We had to do some last-second preparations for the war, which included adding Xinjiang to the Comintern for some reason. I was trying to get reinforcements on the field as quickly as I could, but I was out of time. The Germans broke the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, initiating Barbarossa, kickstarting what we Soviets remained so proud of years later. The Great Patriotic War had begun. Although I prepared for this as best as I could, I was still doubtful I would win. To tell the truth, I don't actually play vanilla that much. I haven't played the Soviets in ages, so I was worried I would get my ass handed right to me. I didn't have an air force ready to fight the Germans, and my tanks and extra army were on the Iranian border just in case Operation Countenance fired. This is important because even though the Winter War never happened, Finland still attacked because for some reason they thought it did happen. This meant there was a Finnish front when there really shouldn't have been one. Great. At first, it looked like we were holding relatively okay. I decided that while we could still sort of hold the front line, we needed to eliminate Finland. Although they cooperate with the Nazis, they're not in the Axis. This means we can handle Finland separately, so that's what we will do. Because we weren't expecting Finland to be in the war, Leningrad was wide open, so Finland took it without a fight. Luckily, with the arrival of our tanks and the infantry, we swiftly retook the city. Finland was completely incapable of stopping our tanks, so we captured Helsinki and began moving north to take more Finnish cities. To prevent their collapse, they begged us for peace, offering up Karelia. We accepted their peace proposal because if we didn't, then we would have a broader border with the Axis in the north via Norway. Keeping Finland around as a buffer works perfectly for us, at least for now. We moved our infantry and tanks to the main front to try holding back the Axis, but sadly, about 20 units got cut off and destroyed despite our best efforts. This was a major blunder, but we couldn't give up just yet. It became clear that our current defense line was not sustainable, so we made the executive decision to fall back behind the Dnieper River. The war effort was going to be tough, and that became even more apparent when the Axis caught up to our forces. We fought tooth and nail to prevent the Axis from crossing the river. and there were an insane number of times when we nearly breached. We were banking on the Axis losing a lot of equipment to attrition to allow us to launch a counterattack once we were ready. However, that was deeply wishful thinking. We couldn't make effective use of our tanks because of the Axis pressure in the north being relentless. Major issue we had was that we couldn't make a proper front line because of some weird stuff with the state modification mod I had downloaded. I decided to try falling back just a little bit so the front line could be properly connected. However, the shuffling of divisions likely contributed to the Axis finally breaking through our defense line in Ukraine. The Axis breakthrough in Ukraine was a bit sloppy, so we sniped our first of many pockets. We did try to keep up the momentum, but we weren't in a place to do big counteroffensives like that. Not for now, at least. The Axis didn't just cross in Ukraine, they began gaining ground in other places too. We were being pushed back across most of the front line. The Axis got a breakthrough in the north and nearly captured the strategic city of Pskov. Luckily, the arrival of some tanks stopped the Axis just before they entered the city. The war was hectic as hell. We were holding on as best as we could on the front line. The Axis didn't have many fronts to worry about, so naturally they had a ton of stuff on my border. I had to pray that the Allies would do something, but they were incredibly useless the entire time. If the Allies did have a plan, it certainly wouldn't be put into action for a while. We just had to take the brunt of the Axis armies until we could begin counterattacks. Although for a while, I was holding back the Axis in the north, I made the decision to withdraw from Estonia. I don't have cores on Estonia, so I actually have to use my own resources to garrison it while I'm also fighting the Germans. In my opinion, it's not worth wasting units on defending territory that isn't even my core. I'd rather pull back from Estonia and move most of those units to the main front. I did try a counterattack in the center, but when looking at the bigger picture, I came to the conclusion that the best place to launch a counterattack would be Ukraine, since that seemed like the place where the Axis was at its weakest. I was kind of right. We launched an offensive in the south to retake the city of Odessa. We got really close, but the attack ended up failing due to supply issues. At this point, the Axis is struggling a lot to push, and their attacks are getting easier and easier to stop. We could now do the Order 227 decision, or we could, once we got enough command power to do it. While waiting, I finished a new port in Ukraine, so offensives became possible again. I managed to get another pocket to hinder the Axis numbers in the area. Finally, Stalin could give out order number 227, no step back. We are done retreating. It is time to march forward and ensure that the Nazis pay for what they've done. While we were slowly pushing through Ukraine, our physicists began working on something that would change the world forever. A nuclear reactor prototype was now being developed in a secret facility in the Urals. These reactors can create perfect and clean energy once we can begin building them everywhere, but they can also be the basis for something far greater in the future. We finally got a pocket around the city of Dnipropetrovsk. This is important because the city had a key regional supply hub that could help our forces in additional counterattacks against the Axis forces. For instance, the extra supply allowed us to finally liberate Odessa from Romanian occupation. We were even closing in on the key city of Kyiv, which fell to Nazis during the initial retreat to behind the Dnieper River. At some point earlier, the Allies had landed in the Netherlands and seemed to be on the verge of capitulating Reichskommissariat Niederlande. However, they got pushed out. This time, they've landed in northern France. I hoped that they'll be able to use that landing to blow open the Western Front once again, but I was also very doubtful since I was carrying the land war. It seemed like the Axis had caught on to what I was doing in Ukraine, so I shifted my focus to the north. Originally, I had the simple goal of retaking Vitebsk for its supply hub, but the offensive went so well, I decided to try liberating all of Estonia, which went great. I tried to use the momentum to recapture Riga from the Nazis, but that offensive failed due to a poor supply in the region. While I waited before trying again, I tried looking for other places to launch a counteroffensive. The Axis still had a lot against me, so that was going to be tough. The NKVD did find out that although Germany has more armored divisions in total, we actually have more proper tank divisions than they do. Germany has 6, we have 10. 1944 rolled around, and the push west was slow. It seemed like we'd have to fight for a lot longer, but time was on our side. Germany's economy was completely dependent on conquering other nations and stealing their gold. However, Germany has completely failed to even get close to our major population zones in the heart of the Union. They've maxed out their economy of conquest, so their industry is experiencing hyperinflation on a level not seen in any other nation. They're going to be struggling to support their army, even with a massive industry. We decided to play it a bit ballsy and launch a massive counteroffensive across the entire front line to test the Axis forces. Shockingly, we saw success everywhere. The offensive went really well, and we managed to liberate the Belarusian city of Minsk. After retaking the city though, we had to halt the offensive because we had taken on a massive gun deficit that hurt our capabilities on the battlefield. Still, this showed that the Axis had grown weak. Now that we absolutely knew that our union was secure, we determined it was safe to officially annex Tuva. We got good gains in the Baltics, as during the major counteroffensive, we managed to retake Riga, which opened a door to a much bigger liberation of the region. If we could retake the Baltics, that would actually open a door to Soviet forces entering core German territory. The Allies finally did something useful. They invaded Italy, and after several major Italian cities fell, Benito Mussolini was deposed. However, he fled north and formed the Italian Social Republic in north with German backing. There was also a civil war in Bulgaria as the Fatherland Front staged a revolt, swiftly joining the Comintern. I launched the offensive into East Prussia with the goal of capturing the historic German city of Königsberg. Although we could do a decision to get buffs in the offensive into the city, we didn't even need it as our forces cleared out the city with little issue. I realized that if a major population and cultural center was captured with such little issue, then Germany is likely completely incapable of stopping me. I decided to launch a new offensive against the Axis with that in mind. The collapse began, as the Axis forces couldn't do anything to stop me now. Romania would end up being the first Axis member to surrender to us. The victories didn't stop there though. Using our foothold in East Prussia, we pushed into Poland and liberated Warsaw from German control. While all that was happening, we were on the brink of achieving a massive pocket. After Romania surrendered and Warsaw was captured, we finally closed the pocket and encircled 2 full armies. This is a massive loss for the Axis, since they can no longer afford to replace their losses. With so many units cut off, our forces stormed the city of Berlin. With the loss of Berlin and the status of Adolf Hitler becoming unclear, the collapse of the German Reich and the entire Axis in Europe is upon us. When we finally crushed that big pocket we got earlier, it was determined that 435,000 Axis soldiers had perished in that pocket. A very satisfying victory, especially since 9 German tank divisions were caught, including about half of their capable tanks. Finally, after we marched through most of Germany's major cities, the German Reich surrendered to us. The war didn't end with the fall of Germany though. We had to march into Budapest, which was generally pretty simple. Once that was done, Hungary surrendered. With Hungary down, the Axis powers finally surrendered. The murderers and rapists of our people are dead. Evil has been vanquished. The war in Europe was over. The Axis in Europe was defeated as the last soldiers surrendered to either us or the Allies. Now we needed to divide the spoils. Now, we could have taken most of Germany for ourselves. However, in an earlier conference, we agreed to a split of Germany with the Allies, even if they don't deserve it. Our spies had determined that America was also working on achieving nuclear weaponry, so they advised against antagonizing the United States. Begrudgingly, we agreed. So, here's what we came up with. We gave France, Belgium, and the Netherlands back to their exile governments. Italy was occupied by the Allies during the war, so that will be their only truly deserved gain from the war. We gave Yugoslavia and Greece their land back also. Although the Allies wanted Poland's independence to be restored, they knew they couldn't do anything about Eastern Europe. We fully annexed Poland's pre-war territories. In Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Romania, we set up pro-Soviet regimes. We also officially united Bulgaria under the Socialist government. Finally, we needed to do something about Germany. We could have taken most of it, but because of the possibility of the Americans getting nuclear weaponry before us, we elected to be nice and divide Germany between East and West among the provisions decided on before the war ended. The Allies did suggest we take Pomerania and Silesia and repopulate them with Poles as a consolation for the Polish people. However, we already decided on annexing East Prussia and replacing its German population with Slavs. And reconstruction is going to be expensive if we want to fully integrate Poland. So it would be better if we let Germany keep the eastern Weimar border. Western Germany would be brought under Allied occupation for the next few years. It was decided that Austria, though, would be restored as an independent and neutral buffer state. One thing we both agreed on was that the Prussian identity and culture must be destroyed. Germany's militarist culture is derived from Prussia, in its history of militarism and conquest. It is inherently responsible for what's happened. So to ensure the events of the Holocaust never happen again, Prussia must never rise again. So now we are once again in a state of peace. However, the Axis powers are not gone. Although in Europe they have been destroyed, the third major signatory of the Axis is still kicking. The Allies have been fighting Japan for the past few years alongside the Chinese United Front. Both have failed to make any significant progress against the Japanese. Clearly, we must intervene in the East to destroy fascism's last bastion. On January 18th of 1945, we officially completed our nuclear reactor. We can now begin building these all throughout the Soviet Union. Our scientists can return to basic nuclear research, since now that we have nuclear reactors, we can begin working on getting a new breakthrough to begin developing nuclear bombs. We managed to make a game-changing discovery that finally gave us the technological breakthrough we needed to finally begin developing the atomic bomb. I wasn't sure if we could finish it during the war with Japan, but it's best to begin working on it now. Our 2 infantry army groups and our now full army of 24 advanced tanks arrived in the Far East, so Stalin gave out the order to declare war on the Empire of Japan. Clearly the Allies in China needed our help badly because despite the Japanese clearly being weak, they haven't been able to take advantage of that at all. One army would focus on Manchuria and the other would be sent into China to assist the KMT and CPC directly. Although we were friends during the Great Patriotic War, we were starting to not trust the Americans. The British and French were not big strong empires anymore, as France was obliterated by the Germans and the British couldn't afford to keep their empire anymore. We gained a massive industry and economy even during the war, and with our nuclear developments, we were poised to become a superpower alongside the United States. Still, we didn't want to immediately be thrown into another new war, so when the Americans suggested we split Korea, we agreed. However, the Americans didn't do shit to warrant them getting a cut of Korea. Zhukov's tanks single-handedly liberated Korea, and not one American boot stepped into Korea. Why should America get a piece of a pie they didn't help with? Anyway, we tried to push into Manchuria with our tanks. Supply was bad though, so for now Manchuria gets to live. We were also trying to get air superiority over Japan with our new advanced fighter planes. We couldn't build an air force during the war in Europe because of Germany always shooting everything down, but now we can actually build an air force. Air superiority is especially important now because I suspected we would need to crutch on paratroopers to invade Japan. Zhukov was ordered to move his tank forces to central China, so we could launch an offensive to liberate Nanking and Shanghai from the Japanese occupiers. Zhukov's tanks had become strong as hell by now, so they shattered the Japanese forces. Nanking was liberated alongside Shanghai and several other Chinese coastal cities. The Wang Jingwei regime soon after collapsed, effectively killing Japan's invasion force. In August, I got the news that our first nuke was finished. I wanted to make a show of force to intimidate the Allies, so I quickly threw together some strategic bombers to drop the nuke on Japan. I also wanted to test my paratroopers to make sure they'd work, so I dropped them on Okinawa. They landed uncontested, so I was confident we could land. To my surprise, the Allies stopped sitting on their asses and launched a naval invasion of Japan. With the Allies now in Japan, I realized now was the perfect time to drop the nuke on Japan. I chose Hiroshima since the Allies controlled the land outside of the city. We dropped the first nuclear bomb in history, flattening the city in one blast. I didn't want to miss out on the fun, so I sent in Zhukov's tanks and the paratroopers, since the paratroopers are a form of special forces. We prepared another nuclear blast, this time for Tokyo. The reason being to kill the royal family so we could install a communist government in northern Japan. However, the strike failed. Doesn't really matter, as the Japanese government practically melted to our forces. Finally, the war would end as the Empire of Japan would formally surrender. So now we had to handle the co-prosperity sphere. Manchuria and Inner Mongolia were given to Mao's Chinese Soviet Republic, while the KMT retook the rest of China. Southeast Asia was just given new governments. Korea and Japan would be where relations between us and the Allies broke down. Although we previously agreed to a division of Korea, we decided not to follow through with that agreement, since the Americans did fuck all to liberate Korea from the Japanese. Korea will be united under a communist regime. Furthermore, it looked like we would fully puppet Japan since we did most of the work in the invasion. All the Allies did was get the landing. However, we decided to let them get southern Japan as a consolation prize. With the fall of the Empire of Japan, the world is once again at peace. However, there is still much tension. Things were a wee bit tense during the European peace talks, yeah, but nothing to cause a total breakdown of relations. It was the detonation of RDS-1 on Hiroshima and a peace in Asia that have caused a lot of mistrust to form between us and the United States. As we look to the future, nuclear weapons become more commonplace as more nations begin nuclear programs of their own. The US by now has tested their own nuclear bomb, and the British and French are undoubtedly intrigued in the prospect of nuclear armaments. However, using these weapons could result in the destruction of humanity. A third world war between the West and the East could be the end of life as we know it. Will humanity end? Well, you will have to find out next week. I believe I have been yapping for more than enough today. I appreciate you sticking around for this long, comrade. The story of the Union is the best story I have, and it's not over just yet. Until next time, comrade.